He loves this example of the cup. So the cup is, at one level, purely material. You can do a chemical analysis of all the stuff that makes this cup. You can describe to me the geometry of how every part of it was designed in CAD. At one point, as an engineer, I could design this for you. I can describe the molecular composition of the water inside. I can describe the little bacteria that are lingering inside the cup because I haven't washed it in a couple weeks. You can confine your conversation to the material, but you will have totally failed to capture the identity of what this thing is. You will only have described it, you will not have identified it, because the identity of a thing is an idea that is manifest in the thing that is greater than the sum of the parts of the thing. It has an idea.
I'm Nick Clooney, and you're listening to the Hey Brother podcast. Join me and my brother Mitch as we challenge each other and other Catholic men to grow deeper in brotherhood, strengthen our faith, and find greater freedom. Hit the subscribe button and join us on this journey. Hey everyone, welcome back to the episode of the Hey Brother podcast. Today I'm joined by guest John Mullen, who is, founder of the men's ministry arena.
Inheritor. No, current director,
Inheritor.
Not the founder.
Current director, which is a men's ministry, Columbus, Ohio, SBO missionary. How you doing today, John?
Dude, doing well. Thanks for having me, Nick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, what's your day been like?
Well, I've been most recently at a PT appointment trying to figure out my right shoulder. Turns out when you do pull-ups every day for 75 days in a row and ignore all minor signs of pain, the body wins.
Yikes.
So yeah, trying to fix that. I'm 33, not 23 anymore, so that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that part of like a challenge, or was just like
Dude,
I'm
it
gonna
was
do it?
yeah, good question. That was a Lenten challenge. I started day one of Lent at 50 pull-ups and had a goal of adding one each day, and did it,
Okay.
but didn't listen to the body very well at all.
Yeah.
So it was just like throughout Lent, looking jacked but feeling pinched, and then get done with the program, kind of keep going, add the weight vest after that just to make it spicier, and I made it too spicy.
Yeah. Woof.
Yeah.
Is it permanent stuff, or is it all stuff that you can get it done?
God willing, it's stuff that can be healed. I just didn't have a good sense of like how to heal a tendon injury. Because
Yeah.
muscle tweak, delayed onset muscle soreness, you can just wait a few days and it goes away, or a week at most. But if it's a tendon, I didn't really know how to heal that, so I just kind of derping around the past few months, combination of rest and then intermittent workouts just to kind of see if it's all better, and it never really was. So it's the challenge of, all right, not really sure how to deal with this, don't know how to get to a setting between 0 and 100 in how I treat my body.
Yeah.
So, okay, in my 30s, trying to do what it takes to actually have some longevity to this, not just like full throttle and then break it.
I think it's a masculine energy right there. We like to go full throttle and then break things.
Amen.
But
Yeah.
can you share a little bit about your story? I know you a little bit, like just from brief interactions, like meeting over at the arena and talking and sharing life there. But a little bit about who you are, what you're passionate about right now.
Dude, yeah, I'd love to. So I grew up in California. I was raised Baptist, Protestant, for which I'm thankful. Great home, loving parents. Was homeschooled for most of that time. Had some difficulty fitting in with other kids well, so requested and was granted to come home from public school after 4th grade, and that was so good for me. Kind of, I don't know, maybe delayed my social maturity a little bit, not a huge amount, but it gave me a place to really just be a kid and kind of get deep into the academic world and prepared well for college.
You were public school till 4th grade, and then homeschooled.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Homeschooling was awesome. Would recommend it as long as it matches the kid's temperament and as long as you have a dedicated parent at home to be kind of a full-time teacher.
Yeah. That makes sense.
If you half-ass it, then you get bad results. But as with everything,
what kind of temperament would you think would be a bad fit for it?
I would say if you've got a really socially motivated, extroverted kid, not a great fit. But if you've got someone who's really motivated by the content itself, by academia itself, and has a desire just to kind of put your head down and grow academically, great fit. So
you find yourself in that category?
Yeah, for sure. More recently, discovered that my motivation can be social and extroverted sometimes, but primarily driven by internal motives. So that's kind of who I am. I find intense reasons for doing things, and I try to be all in on what those things are. So that's how I hurt my shoulder.
There we go. There's, you know it. That's good
Yeah,
insight. That's good
it's a through
awareness.
line. It's a through line for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So
All right,
I
so I
yeah, go ahead.
interrupted.
No,
Continue.
you're good. Yeah, I wound up going to school in Texas, a place called Laterno University. Super small, super conservative Baptist university down in East Texas. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Full of missionary kids who are getting into engineering or nursing or being pilots so they could go back into the bush in Africa. Like one of the best things about my evangelical heritage is the missions centric nature of the subculture, that and
Yeah.
the biblical knowledge. Like you're praying, you're reading the Bible, you're preparing to go to at least do short-term missions. Usually, if you're a high schooler or college kid, and it kind of it's good at keeping the main thing the main thing. And what I'd say it was, I got into this a little bit, but it was kind of weak. Evangelicalism is usually a bit weak in terms of a broader historical consciousness, knowing where we sit in the kind of the grand sweep of Christendom and Christianity. So there's usually early church, and then Constantine question mark bad, and then 1200 years of gap time, and then Martin Luther good, and then 500 years from that of just getting back to the heart of the gospel. So what they get right is what they well, blessing and a curse. But they get interesting with strong upside and strong downside. How about that? Is it's always a revival culture. So you're only one
Interesting.
revival away at any point, and this is especially true in America. Great Awakenings, right? So you're only one revival away from like winning the whole thing. Like
Interesting.
doing the whole world missions, like our generation, God's raising up. It's
Yeah.
very much it plays to media. So it's the Billy Graham, like the tent revival, the big stadium vibe. Like
Interesting.
that is American evangelicalism. Not all of it. There's certainly like a lot even of evangelical and Baptist pastors will decry the kind of the overly mushy nature of that, what some people call evangelis instead of
Yeah.
evangelicals. So if you're talking like megachurch, that really peaked, I think, in the 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
Kind of on the wane now. There's still a lot of megachurches around, especially in Columbus, I'm finding. But
So what's the differentiation between those two? You said
yeah,
evangelical, evangelis. Yeah.
yeah. So if you're raised, it's a spectrum, right? So
Okay.
um, the joke is, what's the difference between a Baptist church and a non-denominational church? And the punchline is the website, because there's really not a lot of doctrinal difference typically. So
Okay.
non-denominational evangelicalism kind of won in the if you can say that denominationalism in America is like an arms race, non-denom was victorious. It worked the best. It was
Yeah.
easiest to scale, almost like a business. And so it produced this beautiful culture of entrepreneurial Protestant Christianity and like
Okay.
self-supported churches outside the umbrella of a large denomination. So you don't get like the top-down bureaucratic feel, which we as Catholics think that's a feature, not a bug, is to have a hierarchy. But one of the
Yeah.
pros of not having one is you can be nimble, you can move fast. One of the cons of not having a hierarchy is you tend to stay in kind of the shallow belt of your vision for what Christianity is supposed to be. So it can become, and I think in many cases has become, a consumer Protestantism, and that would be the evangeli phenomenon. That a lot of especially the smaller churches in the conservative and maybe the Baptist side of things, would say they lost the plot. Like you don't like no smoke machines, no like you can't just say anything and make it rhyme and call it a day. Like you can't. You have to actually be firm. So I'm not saying by any means that all evangelicalism has that lack of historical knowledge. In fact, a lot of the most intelligent, kind of plugged into the church fathers, writers and thinkers and theologians and philosophers in the Protestant movement now are on this kick of they're having their own, kind of like how we had the ressourcement in the 20s and 30s and 40s in the Catholic world. They're having their own return to the sources, rediscovery of the fathers, rediscovery of
Interesting.
liturgy, rediscovery of sacramentalism. So it's happening. Like there's intellectual development within that stream, absolutely. I
Interesting.
would never want to do a cheap shot or a cheap polemic or pejorative against the movement as a whole. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it sounds like you're quite fond of it and
oh
have
yeah,
like grown a lot because of it.
oh yeah, gave
Um.
me everything that I came into my faith with. Love of the
Yeah.
Bible, love of Jesus, love of the body of
So
Christ, openness to the Holy Spirit. Like all those things are the fruit of my
why'd you
evangelicalism.
why'd you convert?
$1 million question.
Yeah.
So to answer that, I have to resume my story. I went
Yeah.
to I went to grad school at OU, Ohio University, 2014. hung out a lot with Campus Crusade people or crew people because for whatever reason they got a little shy of the name Crusade about the 2010s. Oh, nobody's perfect. But
Yeah.
they dropped Crusade and became crew, and it was awesome. Um, I was pretty naive at that point in my faith. I'd been exposed to charismatic Protestantism through the Vineyard Church and had absorbed a little bit of triumphalist theology through that lens. Um, did great things for my encounters with the Holy Spirit and openness to like love of the Father,
Yeah.
brotherhood with Jesus Christ, like all those things, hugely transformative for me when I was about 20, 21. That was awesome. Um, but what it gave me as well was a bit of a poison pill combined with my own kind of middle class sheltered naivete, which was, John, by following God, you will be kept safe from needless pain. Like you'll be kept safe from unnecessary, in my mind, pain. Like, yeah,
Mm.
sure, things might hurt, but God's going to soften the blow. And that wouldn't have been so much a conscious claim as it was a subconscious presupposition. So the first time I had a really nasty, of course it was a woman, first time I had a nasty breakup, nasty by my definition, it was just unexpected and painful. And, not someone who torched my car and left me stranded on the side of the road. Not anything like sitcom type
Yeah.
behavior, just run of the mill college, thought I was going to marry this woman, then God told her otherwise.
Mm.
That was enough to kind of put me into a tailspin that took years to recover from.
It's a terrible answer. I mean, it's a good answer, but it's
Yeah,
something that I hear a
common.
lot of guys comment. Yeah, it's like, oh,
Yeah, yeah,
you're.
yeah,
It's a hard answer. I shouldn't say terrible. It's a
yeah.
good answer. Like if
It's a
God's telling you not to marry somebody, then you should probably listen. But it's
terrible
like,
phenomenon, common answer, I think, if I
yeah,
had to guess.
yeah,
And so I wound up graduating from grad school 2017, kind of limped out of there, super depressed, went out to San Diego to try to um, heal my heart with surfing and rock climbing and being a cool guy, engineer
nice.
on the coast. Turns out, as mom says, wherever you go, there you are. So you can change
Yeah,
location, but you can't change yourself by moving. Eventually,
yeah,
you catch up with yourself, and I realized, oh shoot, like my faith is now too rocky, and I'm too cynical and angsty for me to blend in well and have fun and really feel like deep roots with the Christian crowd. But I'm far too Christian minded still for the secular crowd. So I was really fish out of water. Kind of limped along faith-wise for a number of years. Really, the only thing that kept me going. Um, Never stopped going to church. Not sure why. I
okay,
think I had a hunch that if I stopped, I wouldn't come back. Had some friends, not what I'd call real brotherhood. Was looking for it. Didn't really have kind of that band of brothers around me to support me. Felt like a bit of a solo act. Got close with the pastor at a church I was going to at the time, and then a year or so later, he resigned after confessing to being an adulterer for the past decade. So that
oh
sucks.
shit, dang,
Yeah, that kind of
that's rough.
blows. That blows. Yeah, so it's like, come on, man, can't I catch a break here?
Yeah.
Um, and then,
Real quick before you go
yeah.
on, can you take me back to you said you had friends, but like it didn't feel like real brotherhood. Like
hmm
what do you mean by that?
Oh man, I'd always been. So I'm always not motivated. I'm always very shaped by how my relationship with God is doing in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how I socially show up. So if I'm doing pretty well with God, that I can be the warm center of the room. If things are
Yeah.
not going well in prayer and with, we'll say, my connection with God, then I will be just the worst person to be around that you've ever met. And so in that situation, it's hard to kind of get your way out of that pit because once you're in it, you're unappealing for guys to be around. And so unless you're in a community that knows to look for the guy who's struggling and reach out to him and make sure that he's okay, and not in like a cheesy way, but like, hey, get your butt in gear, get back in the mission, and we're here to surround you and support you to get to the root of whatever you're going through, and we're not going to give
Mm.
up until you're good. Like if you don't have that group, and I didn't,
Yeah.
if you're not in a community that builds men like that with that kind of
Yeah.
missional focus, then you can just like putter along for years at the outskirts of a community. And so
Yeah.
that
Like
was kind of
lacking
my experience.
intentionality. Is that kind of like
Yeah,
what the
yeah. I mean,
yeah
coastal Californians are a lot of things, but super intentional and gritty is not a word I would typically use to describe them.
yeah
So they're good. They were kind. They're kind of in that conservative-ish, liberal-ish West Coast San Diegoan middle. and great
Yeah.
people. Like I wound up in the room with those kind of evangelical types on the coast, going to things like homeless ministry, which we did every week for years, and that was awesome for me. That probably kept me anchored in a real way, but it was hard to. I didn't have the social gas in the tank or the gentleness to kind of slowly, carefully nurture relationships with guys who didn't respond super well to like just direct kind of conversational punches. And so I was in a space where I was mostly being jabby in my conversation
Mm,
and in my demeanor, and they were guys that kind of like shied away from that, a little more passive,
gotcha.
not quite so confrontational. Again, West Coast. So you
Yeah.
wind up with this kind of like chase and retreat kind of dynamic. It's like, hey, I want good brothers, but the way I reach out for it is too harsh or too sharp or too sarcastic or cynical, and
Yeah.
so that tinge kind of drives them away. And then if they already have
Mm,
good friends within the group, maybe from college, and they stayed local, then they're not looking for, there's not like a space in their lives that they've intentionally created for you to enter into. So yeah, you can come along and hang out, and we'll, kind of be moderately close. But in terms of like, I don't know, small group that goes to the depths of what we're actually experiencing as men, that wasn't really out there. One exception,
yeah.
did some therapy for a while, but that was one-on-one. So the intentionality was there, but it was in a paid context. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're actually doing this from a Catholic perspective and a Catholic anthropology now, because let me tell you, Freudian slash Jungian secular therapy winds up, in my experience, being navel gazing more than actual
Yeah.
identity healing, because it
Yeah.
teaches you to look inward at whatever you think you are, which is notoriously fickle, unreliable, especially if you're like depressed and melancholy. Why would you ask that guy who he is? He doesn't know.
Yeah.
So it's like, let me just add to your burden of self-definition.
Well,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think I mean, there's real value to Freudian and like Rogerian. You said
Yeah,
Rogerian or yeah,
Jungian, but
there's
yeah, I mean, it was
young Carl
Rogerian as
Jung.
well.
Yeah,
You could tell it
yeah,
had come through all the
yeah,
20th century evolution of technique. But yeah, kind of a Freudian
yeah.
psychoanalytic perspective.
Yeah. If it's not grounded, yeah, it's like it gets really crazy really fast, right?
Hmm.
It's like all of a sudden you're like looking at Freud and everything's sex, right?
Yeah,
Like, and it's
yeah.
just like okay, well, let's slow down. Like obviously, like there is like a healthy way to look at sex, and like you
Hmm.
can look at TOB, and
Hmm.
like you're not too far off, Freud. Like
Yeah,
you're almost right,
yeah. Just
but
wrong into the
you're
telescope.
yeah, and so it's like if it's not grounded, you're gonna find yourself in a world of hurt. So,
Yeah.
but you started that like was that part of the journey, the process from
Yeah,
like
yeah, that
California
was
to
no, that was kind of middle couple of years of my time in California. So like 2018 to
okay,
19, I think was, or 17, I forget the years, but we'll call it a couple of year period where, so it
yeah,
made me more eloquent at describing my depression, and lack of
mm,
firm identity, but it wasn't really
yeah,
helpful in activating anything because it grounded it in me. It was like the whole point was self-actualization, but what the problem was I didn't have the actualization potential within myself. It was out of my
yeah,
resources that I felt like it was somehow elusive. I could feel good one day and then think that I had achieved like integrity of identity, and motivation and integration, and then the next day you just wake up feeling worse, and you can't, if it's feelings based and all volitional upon you to kind of self-define almost in a Nietzschean sense, then yeah, it's going to fall apart as soon as you get flicked over by some new, I don't know,
yeah.
impetus
So
downward.
too overwhelming, right?
Yeah,
Like
too
that's
overwhelming.
way too much on
Too
yourself.
much. And yes, I didn't have faith in God's goodness because God was the one that told that woman to break up with me. So I didn't have like the root issue of is God trustworthy figured out.
Yeah,
The divine betrayal of being created fallen and human, but having an instinct for the eternal and the perfect. And if you don't have a path upward that you can actually ascend towards heaven in your own mind, um, if you, let me rephrase that, if in your own mind you do not have a clear plan to get by grace and by effort from where you are to where you feel like you want to go, which is the state of perfection that all men strive for, yeah, you're gonna be bitter, resentful, cynical, mistrustful, what's been
yeah,
called the hermeneutic of suspicion. which means that the hermeneutic, or the means of interpretation of the world around you, your lens, is now one of suspicion by default. So you can have an impactful experience with Jesus in the context of praise and worship in an evangelical, like, um, church service. So that is an emotional experience. But if you do not have the root suspicion against God rooted out in your own heart, then the next day you'll deconstruct it and say, I don't know what that was. That could be anything. That
Yeah.
could be my brain chemistry. That could be the that could be my Darwinistic monkey brain struggling against the futility of the eternal death that awaits me at the end of this life. And you can
Yeah.
critique it from any number of materialistic or sociological, or, like, we'll call it Darwinistic, anthropological, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no way out of that. It's a closed loop, because nothing can actually get in as long as you feel that gulf between the subjective and the objective in this philosophical sense, or this existential sense. Like, good luck, because none of your
Yeah.
experiences are trustworthy. If you can't trust God, and you're a man of faith, as I was at the time, always have been, uh, what happens when that faith is unsettled? Well, your very being and your ability to interpret reality correctly is unsettled. So that was my
Yeah.
experience for better part of a decade, I'd say, from 2015 or 16 all the way through 2020. Really,
Do
the
you
only
think?
thing. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you think men are more susceptible to that kind of, like, I guess, defense against
Yeah,
the gospel? Like, I think
yeah,
it's
that's.
I encounter a lot of guys who like to go to the intellectual route, right? Like
Hmm.
that tends to be the thing that we can use to keep
Hmm.
things arm's length away. I don't really have
Hmm.
to trust something. I just gotta make
Yeah,
sense of it. Like,
yeah. I think men in doubt or in despair will more often tend to intellectualize it, than women, which is both a blessing and a curse, because you don't want to get stuck in this hyper rationality or hyper rationalism. But it's a blessing in that it really was only when I had those rational questions answered that I was able to
yeah,
rebuild my life. But once I had that in place, I was able to do reintegration work, if you want to use a psychological language, to a much greater extent than I think I would have been able to do had I not had that masculine drive towards mastery of the intellectual and the philosophical.
yeah,
So for me, that began in I want to say 15 or 16, with Jordan Peterson. He kind of
oh wow,
helped me in that dark period from 2015 to 2020. Peterson helped me avoid the worst moments of nihilistic or atheistic despair, because he teased
okay,
me out of that materialistic frame that I was tempted to fall into, where God is nothing except the pinging around of electrons inside the brain. He said, his because he's not, even now, he's not a self-professed Christian, but he is and was someone who poked through the materialistic and the mechanistic kind of guardrails that the Enlightenment and modern secularism wants to put around our thought. So he said, so really, the only thing that determines whether you are pointed upward or downward right now in your life is your response to this stimulus of suffering. You can either voluntarily adopt a healing aspect of suffering and become a source of strength for your community around you, or you can descend eternally into the suffering and become
wow,
resentful and vile and nihilistic and bitter, and that will be as much hell for you on earth as are the medieval depictions of hell in those old paintings. So he kind of, like,
wow,
on the existential, the phenomenological level, he said, like, these things are not just ideas. These things are not eternal claims of where your soul, whatever that means, is going. This is your being now is in a state of uh, of either upward ascent towards the highest ideal that you can envision, or downward descent towards the lowest thing that you are tempted to become. And that's not subjective. It's not materialistic, because your material of your brain is the same either way, but it's not mechanistic, and it's not merely subjective. There is a unity of
yeah,
experience of the subjective and the objective in your experience of the phenomena of reality. And the way you
yeah,
choose to interact with them determines a vast amount of the output and the result of your life. And so that kind of thinking was enough to keep me from going full Darwin or full atheist. But it
man,
wasn't enough to land the plane. It wasn't enough to really rebuild myself upon, because it was just asking questions more than it was providing answers, which is a good place to start. I would say the thinker that helped get me to a fully reintegrated sense of philosophy and theology, and eventually sacramentology, that led me to the Catholic Church was, interestingly enough, an Orthodox thinker and icon carver and YouTuber named Jonathan Pageau.
Interesting.
So a
Well,
lot,
before you jump
yeah,
into him, like I just want to say I think one, like I'm convicted by like your recap of like Peterson's, like
yeah,
just in my own experience, just
good.
hearing it, like not that like it's like I'm not like changing major beliefs
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm,
my system of beliefs right now,
sure,
but like it's just like a re-encountering of stuff that I already have heard before, and
yeah,
just like I think you put it together in a really impressive way. I think
thanks,
you have a sharp intellect, and you're able to put together ideas and
thanks.
thoughts, and I want to like bring it down just a little bit level from the philosophical
Yeah,
language,
yeah,
to talk about like how it was impacting me, and then shoot it
yeah,
back over to you.
yeah,
But it's like it's so easy for us to get trapped in like theory as men,
yes,
and like just this abstract idea of like what's the next day gonna be like, or
yeah,
what is this whole big idea of living like.
yeah,
But then to like be woken up and be like, no dude, you have to start living now.
yeah.
like
You have to
like
wake
you're
up
no.
today with the memories of that woman that broke your heart now.
Yeah.
And you have to have a strong enough why now to go to that
Yeah.
engineering job that you resent for being mundane and mediocre.
Yeah.
You have to,
And
yeah,
it's awesome that Peterson got you there,
yeah,
in which like
yeah,
maybe the therapist did not.
no,
Like where it's like it's important and acknowledge it, and I think it's such a common experience for
mm-hmm,
men,
mm-hmm,
to be what's the word I'm looking for, disjointed from
yeah,
reality, like from
yeah,
the current state of like how they're feeling.
yeah.
um
Well, I'll give a concrete example to avoid the so far justified accusation that I've been too ethereal, which you haven't made, but I would level it myself. My therapist, one of his great contributions to my life was suggesting that I channel that excessive sexual energy that a 26-year-old man feels by taking up the habit of masturbation.
oh wow. Wow.
So that tells you
Woof.
some of the potential for resentment that I have over against the secular therapeutic model. So just
Yeah.
being in this conversation, we'll call this a moment for healing. Um,
Yeah.
that was extremely frustrating. As a good
Yeah.
evangelical kid, I had been preserved somehow from porn and masturbation into my mid 20s, and it was
Hmm.
only by the advice of my therapist that I take up this great new idea of jerking off that I then
Yeah.
that became something that no porn addiction, thank God, but just the act itself became something that I realized, oh, this is not helping at all, and this is actually making
Yeah.
things worse, and I do not want this. But now,
Yeah.
congratulations, you have a brain chemistry desire for this. So it's going to be a loop that your subconscious opens from time to time, and
Yeah.
now you're going to have to fight it off. And that became the next 5 years of dropping that sticky habit. So
Man,
only
I'm
dropped
sorry
off.
that you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, it sucks. Like that's
Yeah,
part of the reason I do what I do is like
yeah,
there's straight up bad advice being
yeah,
given in therapy in
yeah.
different places, particularly in
Because
the
he
secular
he
world.
meant
Yeah.
well. He meant
Yeah.
well, but his anthropological frame was incomplete, and
Yeah.
he didn't have a virtue ethic at the heart of his anthropology. It was a self-actualization, which was more, I don't know, Freudian Nietzschean than it was Christian or virtue-based. So
Yeah.
again, if the only good of the model is actualization of the desires of the self, then there's no it just it's a flat circle. There's nowhere up to go from there. And so I
Yeah.
was being teased with this kind of flat circle feeling in therapy, and I was being like, okay, which way am I going to point my life from Peterson? And then a couple things happened to me, both very impactful. I started listening to the work of Jonathan Pageau on YouTube in 2019 because he was, or 2018, I forget which, he was kind of the next step for me after Peterson, because Peterson got me to the point of, hey, this Bible is interesting and it has some eternal truths that are true about you today, not just true about a mythological Cain and Abel back when. You might want to think about this. This is the bedrock of Western civilization. You might not want to be so glib as you dismiss it. Richard Dawkins. And so the internal Peterson, the internal atheist in my head were arguing back and forth at the same time as my therapist was like, "Hey, you should masturbate." So that was kind of like
Yeah.
the brain chemical as I was resenting my mediocre engineering career and realizing that I was really crappy at surfing. I didn't like rock climbing that much, and I didn't want to go do Molly at parties. So it was like, "All
Wow.
right, what am I doing here? Like, what the heck is my life? I don't understand anything." And Pageau drops into this. One, he's a convert from Baptist, so he understands the Western Protestant mindset very well. Two, he's an icon carver. What the heck is that? He's a guy whose
Mhm.
job it is to go around and carve sacred scenes in the way of representation that is still common in the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is not realism in the Western mode. It is symbolism in the Eastern mode. So the way they represent everything, perspective, human anatomy, plants, animals, cosmic, sun, moon, stars, whatever, it's all wrapped up into this mythological frame, right? So if you're a rationalist expecting harsh realism in this Western mode, you're going to be disappointed. But what Pageau offered me was an integrated universe in which subjective and objective could finally be brought back together. Because
Wow.
and the way he did this was deceptively simple. He loves this example of the cup. So the cup is at one level purely material. You can do a chemical analysis of all the stuff that makes this cup. You can describe to me the geometry of how every part of it was designed in CAD. At one point, as an engineer, I could design this for you in a CAD program, computer aided design. That's what CAD stands for. Um, I can describe the molecular composition of the water inside. I can describe the little bacteria that are lingering inside the cup because I haven't washed it in a couple weeks. And there's you can you can you can confine your conversation to the material, but you will have totally failed to capture the identity of what this thing is. You will only have described it, you will not have identified it, because the identity of a thing is an idea that is manifest in the thing that is greater than the sum of the parts of the thing. It has an
Hmm.
identity that is not objective in this materialistic way, but it is way more true than whatever materiality the thing is made from. So Peterson hints at this idea when he says, like, you think your car is a simple mechanical object, but it's not. Your car breaks down on the side of the road, and then you tell me what it is. It's a bag of snakes. And in the same
That's a
way,
great Peterson. That's a great Peterson
thanks,
impression.
thanks. And so what Pageau did was he kind of pulled that knot tight for me, which was, look, there is um, it's not just an idea. It's more like the Plato would say it's the form of the thing. It's the soul or the spirit of the thing that manifests in the material world and gives shape and gives the proper integration of the material components so that it can properly host or manifest or represent the form of what it's supposed to be. And so that's true of a cup, that's true of a table, that's true of a lamp, that's true of clothing, that's true of animals and plants. It's true from the lowest all the way up to the highest level of complexity, and it's true of the human being. And so we
Mhm.
live in a world in which the subject and the object cannot be experienced separately from each other, because without
Yeah.
the objective truth, the non-material yet objective truth of what this is supposed to be, this thing would have no shape. It would have no ability to cohere. It would not be a coherent idea. It would not be a coherent expression. It would have an empty bottom, or it would have like holes in the sides. It wouldn't be made of the right material. It wouldn't do what it's supposed to do. We are integrative beings living in an integrative world. And if we don't have that moment of contact between the two, the spirit and the flesh, if you will, or the heavenly and the earthly, or the form and the matter, use whatever duality you want to describe those things. If you don't have a proper relationship and orientation of those two things relative to each other, the kind of the intermingling and the co-expression of them, you don't have a world. And so
Yeah.
that didn't tell me that Christianity was true, but it told me that I lived in a cosmos that was fundamentally one of togetherness and encounter. And so once that, I remember I was sitting in my car and it's 2019 when that clicked, and it was as I could feel almost like I was in like a wind tunnel for a few seconds, like all the hair on your body stands on end, and you feel the rush of, like, I don't know if you've had a moment like that where you feel that you're in the presence of something holy and terrifying yet
Yeah.
exhilarating. Like or like your spine has been out of alignment for years and the chiropractor finally sets it right. It's like you
Yeah.
finally feel movement where before there was stiffness, and it's clarity where before there was only ambiguity. And that was a huge turning point. Another was I went to the evangelical church I was going to at the time in 2019, brought in, of all things, a charismatic Anglican lay preacher, so not a clergyman, who had a gift for the prophetic, and specifically prophetic prayer, prophetic exorcistic prayers. And I went up after the service and I said, "Look, my heart is a wreck. I am full of anger and I'm full of confusion." Actually, I didn't even say those things. I said, "I'm not doing well. Can you pray for me?" And he said, "Yes." And we prayed for a bit, and he was like, "I feel like you're going through X, Y, and Z. Is that right?" And I said, "No, not quite. Try again," which is a common back and forth if you've ever been in a charismatic kind of prayer service experience. And so then he said,
Sure.
"Oh, okay. I think you are wrestling, John, with three things: anger, confusion, and death. Maybe not like suicidality, but like a spirit of despair." So, and
Yep.
that was exactly true. That was so true that I actually had a bodily reaction to it. I
Wow.
felt almost the opposite of that wind rushing kind of experience, that benevolent
Mm,
numinous. I felt like the more of a demonic sensation of like, oh, that's calling out things that have been attacking me. So
interesting.
this has no kind of ability to convince a skeptic. This is more like the purely subjective. And yet it was so true in my body and in my mind. I knew that he was accurately identifying things, ideas, spirits, if you will, that had been tormenting me for years. Just rage against God, absolute rage. Confusion, inability to know the truth about anything, inability to be fixed in truth of anything, and then underlying both of those things, just a spirit of despair. Like, what's this even for? Is
Yeah.
there anything worth hoping for? And I felt, in addition to kind of the fear and the sense of something within me that was being called out, um, I felt this weird like loosening on the back of my skull, almost as if talons that had been clenched in me for a long time were beginning to be pried out. And that was not. I was weeping, of course. I was, shaking and crying, because when
Yeah.
something like that in your heart is poked by someone who has no right to be able to know those things, and then he directs your heart in that moment back to God, it's a deeply vulnerable place, and it's a moment of encounter, intense encounter, um, and it was unpredictable and unforced enough that it had tremendous experiential weight for me. So a cynic would call it subjective or guesswork or a cold read or whatever. Um, but for me at that time, and even now, I think, okay, those two things, the intellectual reconstruction from Pageau and then the spiritual encounter and really exorcistic like prayer to get me some freedom from what had been tormenting me, those two things, both in 2019, by the way, that was not the the quick and easy fix, but it was the beginning of the reintegration of self. It gave me space to begin to kind of put building blocks together, and eventually, I moved to Columbus in 2020 when the world went nuts over COVID. I was like, I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
I'm out of California. So I got a job in Columbus. A friend of mine from grad school helped me find a job in his engineering company. I came to Columbus, bought a house in a suburb of Columbus in 2020. 2021, my neighbor introduces himself to me. Turns out, providentially, that he is a charismatic Catholic and
Oh yeah.
invites me to be a part of that scene in Columbus, which I never would have discovered for myself ever if God had not like
Yeah.
plopped it in my lap. And so being around the third thing that actually led me to the Catholic Church, after I'd say the intellectual love of sacramentality, this world of encounter, of contact between heaven and earth, kind of expect a world in which the Eucharist is possible, by the way, that it would
Mm-hmm.
have meaning as this moment of ultimate encounter, ultimate oneness of being. That was the framework, and then the spiritual freedom to actually begin to explore this new world intellectually. Um, Once those things were cast off me, and I could get some breathing space away from the anger and the despair and the confusion. Columbus was the place where God put me back together fully in the context of brotherhood that my neighbor Mike introduced me to. Because these guys, these SPO graduates, many of whom were former missionaries or at least former students who had lived in household with SPO, at OSU, like these guys sought me out, and they made
Yeah.
space for me to be angsty and in process and intense and moody, and they made space for me, and they treated me like I was interesting, and they treated me like I mattered, and they treated me like I had things to contribute to the community, even as this kind of like, is he a Protestant? Is he a Catholic? Is he Orthodox? Does he know? Like, they were fine with me working it out, and they were simply there to be brothers. And
Yeah.
that was the thing that finally allowed me to feel comfortable landing the plane in 2023 and converting. And so that was how Brotherhood was the last linchpin. Because you can be theoretical, like you can be spiritual, you can be theoretical, you can be intellectual, but until the rubber meets the road with good men that you trust in your life, you're not going to change. You're not
Yeah.
really going to take those steps. Certainly not as fast. Like, you might be the hermit that's meant to go off to, Mount Athos by yourself, but probably not. Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, is that I'm cognizant of time, and there's so much to dig into. I'm like, this is all so good, and I'm like, we could probably talk for another
Oh no,
hour
did
or
I lose you?
so. Uh,
Lost you there for a second. Keep going. Keep going.
but it's like, I do want to kind of wrap it up and
For
put a
sure.
bow on things here a
For
little
sure.
bit. Like, and I think you were leaning into it right there at the end of what you're saying. Like what's one thing? Like, I always like to ask this with guests. Like, one
Yeah.
thing they would offer men out there who are listening.
Yeah.
Like one way that can help them grow. And then,
Yeah.
real quick, I want to also have you plug what's going on in Columbus with the arena and how people can get in touch
Yeah,
with you
for
there.
sure. I mean, it's the same answer for both. Like, get around good men that are about
Yeah.
your age and that are zero, like -1 to +1 steps ahead of you or behind you spiritually. Like, get around guys that are men you respect, but men who are in process, and men who are looking for brotherhood as they are in process. Like, don't go for the guy that refuses to talk about what he's actually going through, and don't go for the guy that is so disoriented, that he has nothing, like no momentum to offer you. Like, you will rise or
Mm,
fall to the level of the men you seek out. This is not a
yeah.
solo act. Like, the lone wolf thing is not real. You there are a handful of Lone Ranger types in the world, and I don't know many of them. I'm not one. I will. I mentioned I was homeschooled, and that was good for me academically. The thing that I had to learn later was that you can go through, like, you can check a number of boxes in this American academic system as a solo act, but you can't live a life. You can't find the motivation for an actual life lived well by going through box checking as a solo act. So you have to have some social motivation, because the default human experience is social motivation. We know who we are. There's a therapeutic concept, I'm sure you know better than I do. You find who you are by experiencing yourself in community, in
Mm,
relationship with other people. And so we have the ability, the need, and the opportunity to find young men in Columbus, get them in a room together, call it the arena. The name hardly matters. It just has to signal that we're kind of in this struggle together, and that we expect it to be tough but good. And so the name
yeah.
arena conjures, I didn't come up with that, I'm not clever enough, but this idea of get in the arena of your life, like in the Teddy Roosevelt speech, which is what the model is named after. Like, the spectator is not the man who counts, but the one who's actually in the arena, who's taken the hits, who has dust and sweat and blood on his face. You can see what's not working, and you can see that he's not giving up. And when the other men sense that in the room, and they sense that for them, not antagonistic, but kind of, um, and not merely supportive in this, like, face-to-face frame, but like, we are side by side moving into the same mission, which is, one, to take hold of the healing and fullness of identity that we believe only God can give. This is not a therapeutic, in secular therapeutic frame in which we're looking for self-actualization and self-activation from ourselves. This is identity is conferred from above. It is granted from above. Just like this cup
Yeah.
doesn't know what it is without an intelligence and an intentionality acting upon it. So I too do not know who I am without God's intentionality acting upon me. And it just so happens that the way he most loves to kind of get into the weeds with men so that he can rebuild their sense of masculinity in this fragmentary world, this world of noise and distraction and pornography and addiction and quiet despair. The way that God has ordained in his mercy that we would get into this with each other is face to face with brothers, the eye to eye contact of, like, yeah, that's not great, but I'm here for you, and I'm not leaving until you are better. And we are
Yeah.
going to do this, and you can do this because God has decreed that you can do this, because Jesus did not suffer, die, and ascend in order for you to have a half-assed life. Like there's fullness and abundance now, and it will look like at times victory and at times suffering. But as Catholics,
Yeah.
what do we know? That suffering is redemptive, right? So we offer it. We
Amen.
can offer things up and not merely endure them or resent them. That the obstacle becomes the way, and you will take the temperature of the room of men you surround yourself with. And so that's why the arena. That's why I quit my job in 2024. Done with engineering, full-time SPO missionary, big pay cut, but a huge increase in life satisfaction and life meaning, because I'm in the
Yeah.
game. Like the things that I needed in my 20s and didn't get from the guys around me are things that I can now offer men that are in Columbus looking for, we'll say, a fuller, richer, deeper, masculine Catholic life. And that's what the arena is. The goal is to be the environment in which that can happen.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much for your work and what you're doing with that, and being on the podcast and sharing that.
Yeah.
What like if guys are, I really encourage men who are listening right now who are looking for that kind of fellowship, like to reach out to John. You can share your email and go check out the arena social media pages to get connected with what's going on there. What's
yeah,
those
thanks for that. Appreciate
links?
that. I mean, send me an email, johnjohn.mullen, MULLEN @spo.org, or just send me a text. I don't care. I'll give my number. It's 661-917-2277. Just text me, email me. And then if you want to take a look at our Instagram presence, currently revamping it, so don't expect a lot of flash, but it'll have the info you need. And that is, I think it's just at Columbus Arena. If you just go search on Instagram for Columbus Arena, it'll show up. It looks like a Spartan mask surrounded by a Coliseum. So it's pretty easy.
Nice.
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
That's it. I'll find us. Join us.
Join us. I'll throw those links in the description too, so it's easy for
dude.
people to access. And John, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story.
Yeah,
Again,
man.
I'm like, I want to talk for hours. I think there's so much to glean from the conversation.
There's
A lot
more
of
there.
the Catholic psych program is all like built on John Paul II's personalism.
Yeah.
So like as you're talking about subjective and objective combining, like he hit it out of the park with that. John Paul did. So
amazing.
Anyway, thanks so much for being here. If guys out there who are listening want to get connected with what I do with Crafted for More, I help men become who it is that God's made them to be by working through addiction, working through purpose things, those things that John was talking about in
Identity stuff.
this episode. Identity stuff. Yeah. There's so much things that we need help with working through, and Brotherhood's one way to tackle that, and absolutely go for it. But if you feel like there's something deeper there and need somebody who's trained in the expertise of psychology, spirituality, and anthropology, I'd be happy to walk with you. You can find out more information at craftedformore.com. So, John, thanks for being here.
Delightful.
Have a great rest of your day,
me,
man. And God bless.
You too, brother.
Thanks for listening to the Hey Brother podcast. If this episode has been a blessing for you, help us grow by sharing it with a brother who needs it. Visit craftedformore.com for more resources in growing a brotherhood, pursuing chastity, and overcoming addiction. Don't settle for less. Hit subscribe and let's become the men God has created us to be.